Okay, now we're going. Now we're good to go. All right. Good morning, everybody. This is the last lesson that we are going to have on Megillat Esther before our shiur, and we have been learning chapter 9. We're going to turn, please, in our text to Megillat Esther, chapter 9, pasuk 16. So if everyone would turn to that, please. Janice, would you read for us?
She said no.
No?
Actually, please call in somebody. I can't, it's very hard to read from this text.
Oh, okay. Beverly? would you-
Yeah, I will.
Beverly's
I'm
gonna read
starting at
first.
16, and mine is a little different from what y'all's is, but I think you can probably follow. And the rest of the Jews of the king's province gathered and stood up for their lives to relieve themselves of their enemies, and killed 75,000 of their foe, but took none of the spoils. On the 13th day of the month of Adar, they rested on the 14th day and made it a day of feasting and rejoicing. And the Jews of Shushan gathered on the 13th and 14th of Adar and rested on the 15th and made it a day of feasting and rejoicing. Thus the prosy Jews, those who lived in unwalled cities, make the 14th day of the month of Adar a holiday of feasting, rejoicing, sending portions of food one to another. Now, Mordecai recorded these events and sent letters to all the Jews living throughout the province of King Ahasuerus, near and far, instructing them to obligate themselves to celebrate annually the 14th and 15 days of the month of Adar, like the days upon which the Jews were relieved of their enemies, and the month which had been transformed for them from one of sorrow to joy, from mourning to festivity, to make them days of feasting, rejoicing, sending food portions one to another, and giving gifts to the poor. And the Jews accepted as an obligation that which they had begun to observe, and that which Mordecai had written to them. And Haman, son of Hamdata, the Agagite, persecutor of all the Jews, plotted against the Jews to destroy him, and he cast a pur to destroy them, and he cast a pur, which is a lot, to shatter them and destroy them. But when she came before the king said and ordered letters to be written to the effect that Haman's evil plot against the Jews be returned upon his own head, and he and his sons were hanged upon the gallows. For this did they call these days Purim, after the poor, because of all the events of this episode, which explains what happened to them and why they saw fit to establish the holiday. The Jews established and accepted upon themselves and upon their descendants and upon all who might convert to their faith, to annually celebrate these 2 days in the manner described here, on their proper dates, never to be abolished. And these days are remembered and observed in every generation by every family, in every province, in every city. And these days of Purim will never pass from among the Jews, nor shall their memory depart from their descendants. Queen Esther, daughter of Avichail, and Mordecai the Jew, wrote about the enormity of all the miracles to establish the holiday with the second Purim epistle. And he sent letters to all Jews to 127 provinces of Hakadosh's kingdom words of peace and truth, instructing them to observe these days of Purim on their proper days in the manner established for them by Mordecai, the Jew, and Queen Esther, just as they had accepted upon themselves and upon their descendants the observance of the feast and of their lamentations. And the word of Esther confirmed the observation these Purim days and the story which included in scriptures.
Okay,
Very good.
wow, all right.
It's a lot.
That's a lot of stuff that was just said. Someone want to give me a little synopsis there? Anyone have anything to say about that, what we just read? No?
Seems to be a lot of repetition.
Well,
Basically,
yeah.
There's
basically,
a lot here.
okay, there is a lot here. Go ahead.
basically, it tells us that we are obligated as Jews to recognize Purim, how it was labeled as poor for the gifts, and that's how we come to give gifts to people of the poor, the poor, P-O-O-R.
Yeah,
And we're obligated to celebrate this through all lifetime.
exactly.
And why it is
Okay.
a holiday.
Okay, and why it's a holiday. Okay, so let's,
Rhonda,
yes,
Rhonda, I just think it's interesting, and I don't know if it happens anywhere else in history where somebody that wasn't like the rabbis of the era proclaimed a holiday for the whole people to observe. You know, anything that came after the Torah was established by the Sanhedrin or a group of rabbis. I mean, this was a queen and her uncle that did it. What religious authority did they have, and why did the people continue to follow this?
well, that's a very interesting
Good
comment
question.
to make. And we have to keep in mind that it seems that Mordecai was a member of the Anshe Knesset Hagadol, the great assembly of all the Jews of that time. And so consequently, he was in the loop, so to speak. And he didn't, I don't think, randomly do it. However, there were, let me address that. And if I don't, let me address it at the end if what we're going to talk about today doesn't address it, okay? So anyone, any other comments before we begin?
Let's not forget Haman. He was hung with his 10 sons after him
All right,
on
right,
on the
gallows.
gallows that he had made for Mordecai.
Okay, that's true. All right, this half of the chapter of chapter 9 is really all about the acceptance of the festival of Purim. Now, and how we should go about celebrating it and how it becomes an institutionalized Chag. But before that, let's just take a minute to think back. You know, I'm very big in understanding what the history, what was going on. There were really only two basic places where the Jews lived. One was Eretz Yisrael, and one was in the Persia Media area. And now, clearly, the Persian Empire, the 127 provinces, meant that the Jews were scattered across the conquered and known world, but they were under the umbrella of the Persian Empire. So when I say there were only two places, so we have this huge, massive 127 provinces, which is from Kush to Hodu. And then we have Eretz Yisrael, which is really included in that area. And so what we find is, what is Mordecai trying to do by announcing this holiday after they had gone through all of this trauma and drama? Trauma and drama, that's a good one. Okay, so So the beginning of this chapter, and I think we mentioned it last time, were the final details of how the battles, and we call it the battles of Purim, played out, and how Queen Esther asked the king for an additional day in Shushan. Now, I want to emphasize again, like I did last week, for all of those who were not here in class and saw the lesson or didn't see the lesson, that this was not an aggressive, offensive battle by the Jews. It was permission given to them by the king through the decree of Mordecai that allowed the Jews to take arms to defend themselves against those who were going to destroy them on behalf of Haman's decree, because the decree that Haman had sent out was not able to be revoked by the king. So the king gave Mordecai and Esther permission to take back the decree only by another decree. And last week we went through basically how the two decrees looked one to another, and how skillfully Mordecai had to craft the decree in order not to miss any detail of the Jews being able to defend themselves. And that was extremely important. And for those from that point on who are what we call moralist or anti-Semitic, find that it was abominable that the Jews killed so many people at the time of their defending themselves throughout the entire Persian Empire. However, had the tables been turned and Haman's decree been carried out without the ability of the Jews to defend themselves, would these same moralists and anti-Semites have lamented the number of people who were killed, the number of Jews killed by the people throughout the empire? I sort of doubt it. So here we find ourselves once again, even when we, the Jews, are in dire trouble and we defend ourselves against our enemy, we are even criticized back then. So things haven't changed at all from the beginning of time until now. So let's talk about the days that the Jews started to celebrate. They were the day after the fighting, the day after the battles. They did not celebrate and rejoice on the battle day. They, the second day, the day after, they rested from the relief of the killing or the battles, the fighting, to defend themselves. Now, they were defend themselves only against those that still wanted to annihilate the Jews based on Haman's decree. Keep that in mind. It's very, very important. Now, in this second half of chapter 9, we really find the rules and regulations of how to celebrate, why we celebrate, and what we do during our celebrations. The key word in the second half of the chapter, of chapter 9, is the Hebrew root word kayam, which means to fulfill, confirm, or establish. The root word, or variations of that root word, appear in the last part of the text, verses 21 through verse 32, 7 times. Kayam, which means to fulfill, confirm, or establish. This word was used over and over repeatedly by Mordecai and Esther as they explained to the Jews for all times how the holiday is to be celebrated. Now, the details of the acceptance of the festival of Purim clearly indicate that Purim's establishment resulted from an active campaign for acceptance in the Jewish world. It wasn't so easy to establish a holiday outside of the Chagim that the Torah had established. All the different Chagim that we have mentioned in the Torah were Torah ordained. But now Mordecai and Esther want this holiday to be ordained and established because they feel that it's very important to unify the Jews under this holiday that was going to destroy them. Some see this as a technical historical note that is meant to connect the plot of the story with the festival of Purim. But however, you see it, this chapter really integrates concealed, and I use that word concealed because there's a lot of hidden things in the whole Megillah. It integrates concealed messages beyond the technicalities of the festival, in which lies a fierce debate, and we're going to talk about this, a fierce debate about the status of the Jews in exile in general, and their position in relationship to their brothers, their brethren in Eretz Yisrael. In other words, how is the world going to see the Jews in Persia, Media, and the provinces other than Eretz Yisrael in relationship to those who left Persia or Babylon and went back to Eretz Yisrael once Cyrus gave the word they could return home? So there's a very important relationship in how we establish the holiday of Purim between those who are living outside of Eretz Yisrael and those living in Eretz Yisrael. Let's go sort of line by line, pasuk by pasuk, and talk about what each of these things mean. So if you take a look at pasuk 16, we see that let's say it's 16 through 18. Does everyone have their text that they can follow along? The text seems to say or represent the spontaneous celebrations after the battles. In other words, as soon as the fighting was over, in the provinces, all the Jews rested, and they established the day after as a day of celebration. They felt that it was, and this was throughout the whole Persian kingdom. So it was very important for us to know that all of these provinces all over the whole area were celebrating at the same time. Now, they celebrated on two different dates. The 15th of Adar was celebrated in Shushan, and the 14th of Adar was celebrated everywhere else, because as we know, Queen Esther asked for a second day of fighting against the enemies of the Jews in Shushan. So they didn't celebrate in Shushan on the 14th. they celebrated on the 15th after the battles had finished. Now, verse 19, let's take a look at 19. That is why Jewish villagers who lived in unwalled towns celebrated the 14th day of the month of Adar, and the occasion of gladness and festivity, and celebrating delicacies to one another. Now, this verse 19 explains how the holiday, it's a technical verse, how the 14th, the holiday on the 14th is celebrated. And here it says Mishteh in Hebrew, Mishteh v'yom tov, which means a chag. And this was as it is written in the Megillah, that it should be considered as a mishteh, a drinking festival, and as a Jewish Yom Tov. But in Mordechai's letter to the people, he does not include Purim in with all the other Chagim, the Torah ordained Chagim, because he felt he didn't want to make it a holiday where there would be no malacha, no work, because he wanted people to be able to go and deliver and send and give money or to the poor. And so he establishes it as a day of holiday, of festivity, of simcha, but he does not include it as a Yom Tov where there's no work. So in the years following the battles or the salvation of the Jews, the celebration on the 14th day, if you live, and it talks about the villagers, it could be anywhere, didn't have a village, a city, anywhere where it was not walled, was celebrated on the 14th. Mishloach manot, because it's plural, mishloach manot indicates that two types of foods should be sent to a friend, a person, and it tells us that we should give tzedakah to the poor. Now, in verse 20, Mordechai recorded these events, and most of us have already, on Purim, have already closed our Megillah or, our Sefer, where we don't even listen to what any of this says. And really, it's the details, the devil's in the details here, but we should really, in this coming Purim, keep your Megillah open all the way to the end, because it's important to read and to understand what Mordechai and Esther go through in order to establish this as a chag. We take it for granted. Adar, it's Purim, Zehu. We don't think about all the details that went into establishing a non-Torah holiday. So if we look at Pasuk 20 tells us that throughout the provinces, the King Achashverosh, both near and far, charging them that they should observe annually, not just as a one-time deal after the battles, but annually, every year, that they should establish the 14th and the 15th of Adar as the days that the Jews gained their relief from their enemy. And it's important to also notice that the Jews had changed the month of Adar from a month of sorrow, because don't forget, Haman's decree had gone out how many months before? How long ago did Haman's decree go out? You
Wasn't it
remember?
almost a year? Wasn't
It's
it like
almost a
11 months?
year, exactly, exactly.
Right.
He was not only going to send out a decree with a date of when everyone could fight the Jews, but this was psychological warfare. They had a whole year in which to worry whether someone would attack them before or during the time period that Haman, announces that they will be free to kill the Jews. So this was a very important event in the time of the Jewish history. And so consequently, this is a time of uniting all the Jewish people throughout the world, the known world at that time, and establishing annually, every year, that they should observe the 14th and the 15th. You see here, it says in Mordecai's letter here that both days should be celebrated. So a long time ago, it was celebrated on 2 days. However, we're going to find out what happens, why we only celebrate basic. Well, we'll talk about this. Okay.
Rhonda,
Yeah.
Rhonda, sorry. Were letters also sent to Eretz Yisrael for the people here to know what was happening? Because it doesn't say that any place. It just says that it went to the 127 provinces.
And Eretz Yisrael was one of them. Yes. Okay.
Wow.
Mordecai says the Jews should observe the days that the Jews rested from their enemies, and the month that was changed for them from sorrow to festivity, to observe them as feasting and rejoicing and sending food to friends and gifts to the poor. Mordecai he requests that both days be celebrated. The way we observe Purim today is a bit confusing once we understand this. So we're going to talk about what has happened since Mordecai's request. Mordecai asked that all Jews celebrate this holiday. I think what he's saying is whether they felt they were affected or not. Clearly, in some places, maybe there were no battles, there were no wars and enemies of the Jews, maybe not, I don't know. It's hard to tell, but wherever there was a Jew, they should rejoice and celebrate. Now, if you take a look at Pasuk 23, let's go to 23. The Jews undertook, now we're learning what the Jews did. The Jews undertook to continue the practice they had begun, just as Mordecai had prescribed to them. So at the beginning, on the day of the 14th, on the original battle day, celebration broke out among the Jews all over. In Shushan, the celebration broke out on the day after, on the 15th, and so Jews were celebrating it on 2 different days, because Jews, say in Hodu, in India, in Ethiopia, in Africa, they didn't know that the Jews were celebrating on the 15th. So they were celebrating on the day of their relief. Mordecai then sends out and says, no, we have 2 days, and this is what happened. And that's why he sends out with his decree a scroll of the Megillat Esther, because it has with it the details of what happened throughout the entire kingdom, the empire of Persia. clearly people in far, far away places did not know what was happening in the walled city of Shushan, and vice versa. So the Megillah goes out with the couriers, with the decree of Mordecai saying to accept both days. And then it says the Jews accepted as Mordecai has prescribed. So, so now we have the question of what happened between the time of celebrating 2 days and the time that we celebrate now. We'll talk about that in a moment. And now in Pasuk 24, we get the last time that we hear Haman's name, and he's identified as the son of Hamdata, and who he is, the Agagite. So, and it says he is the enemy of all Jews. All Jews. It wasn't selective. He had no grudge just against Mordecai. The reason that they put all Jews is so that you understand that the reason that Haman sends out the decree is not based solely on the fact that Mordecai didn't bow down to him. And he basically needed an excuse to annihilate the Jews, and Mordecai was just as good as any. So it was his grudge, his family grudge since King Agag's time of killing the Jews. And he
excuse me, Rhonda, isn't this true right up till today? What you just said?
yeah,
It doesn't really matter what the Jews do. They've got a grudge.
yeah.
So just like you're describing now is today.
Well, exactly. I mean, it's not like let's make peace with the Jews in Israel and we'll live happily ever after. It's let's destroy and annihilate them, and then we'll take over and have a Palestinian state. If I'm telling you, when we learn these texts, we find that nothing has changed ever, nothing. And when we go next in a couple weeks and we start learning Ezra, it's going to blow you away. It sounds like it was written yesterday. It's amazing. It's amazing. So we are always in a very precarious situation. All right.
Maybe we should just have a year-long holiday. It will cover everything.
As long as I don't have to cook for every day, I'm there. Okay, so here we have the cause, the raison d'etre for the holiday. We have Haman's name listed, who he is, the enemy of all the Jews, what he did. He plotted to destroy the Jews and had cast, and how he did it. It's a little review here in this pasuk of the entire story, how he did it, what he did it, why he does it, and the lots that were thrown to determine the date of the annihilation, and how the king, how he got the king to send out a decree. Haman sends it out, and this whole sentence, this whole pasuk and then how he gets hung by the gallows, and it reminds us about the lots, that no Jew should ever put their faith in gambling or lot throwing or the acceptance of something other than the word of God, because those things that like the lots, the poor, that Haman thought was so important are not important to the Jews. They are false concepts to us. They are not what we should put our belief in. We should only put our belief in God who runs the universe. Now, so it tells us about within that,
Oh,
yes,
Rhonda,
yes.
oh,
Go
I just
ahead.
want to ask a question. Is Hanukkah also something that is not in the Torah?
Right.
Isn't that correct? Right, so you had these two holidays. So was Hanukkah established in the same way as Purim?
Sort of. Oh, that's a whole nother Sipur.
Because I have an Ethiopian friend who came here many, many years ago and Torah observant, and they had to learn about Hanukkah and Purim
Right.
because
They're
even though,
not the Torah.
and they were Torah observant, but
Right.
it's not mentioned.
Right. Hopefully, when we get to the books of the Maccabees, we'll learn all about that. Okay, so now we go. Verse 24 explains about who Haman is, what Haman did, why he did it. And reconfirms that all Jews were affected, and the whole thing is calling upon us as Jews to unite and to become under solidarity, united together against always against our enemies. And then we move on. Let's go to verse 27. Let me find it here. The Jews confirmed and undertook upon themselves and their posterity. In other words, they taught it to their children and their grandchildren, and all who joined in, anyone who joined in to become Jewish and to observe Judaism, taught them about the observation of the holiday, these 2 days, without fail, in the manner prescribed and at the proper time each year. So here again, it says the 2 days, okay? So it's very important to understand that in the Megillah, we are told to celebrate these 2 days. Now, here in 28, in Pasuk 28, it says, consequently, these days should be remembered and celebrated by every single generation, family, province, city, and these days of Purim should never cease among the Jews. And it's even said that when Mashiach comes, so many of the Chagim are going to be erased or abolished, but Purim
will stay.
will not be abolished, okay? And then we move on, and it tells us in that sentence, yes,
Rhonda,
yes,
it is interesting, when you're reading it, it makes it, when it says should be celebrated for 2 days, it makes it seem as if we all are celebrating it for 2 days.
well, that's what the point was. That was it, that we should. That's what Mordecai wanted us to do, to celebrate both days. However, I'm going to talk about that in a moment. Okay, hang on to that thought about the celebration. Okay, so in verse 29, it says, then Queen Esther, and now it gives who Queen Esther is for the last time. We're like saying goodbye to the main character. Haman, we get who he's from, where he's from. Now we get Queen Esther, daughter of Abihail, and Mordecai the Jew wrote with full authority. In other words, King Ahasuerus gave them the authority to ratify this
Right.
second letter. Now, a second letter goes out. I'm not sure exactly how much time elapses from all of this. I really don't know. But
Rhonda,
yes,
why does it not mention her father? It only mentions her mother.
Abihail.
Good question.
Maybe
It
we
only
can-
mentions Esther's mother. It doesn't mention her father at all.
Isn't
And
Abihail?
then it mentions Mordecai. And when you're reading it, you begin to wonder, was that a father or was that the uncle? But we know it's the uncle, right? So where is the father?
Abihail is her father.
I thought it was her mother.
Daughter of Avihail. Oh, Avihail is the father.
Yeah.
And where's the mother?
I don't know.
Yeah,
It doesn't mention both. The point is, it doesn't mention both parents.
mention
No,
both parents.
No,
yeah.
it's
But
her
it,
father.
but it usually mentions just the father. The
Right.
mother's only mentioned when there's an illness.
It
Right,
only
right.
mentions the mother.
But there's what I didn't hear.
Yeah, it's a
When there's an
genealogy
illness,
thing.
then they say son
Right,
or daughter of the mother.
right,
But otherwise,
only
when they get
give
called
birth
up
to
to the
them.
Torah, they don't give the woman's name. They just give
Right.
the father's name.
yeah. It's a rare thing when the mother's name is.
We carry them for 9 months and give birth to them, but we're not mentioned.
Well, let's not go there for right now, okay? Okay, all right. Okay. I really want to answer that. I went to a shiur last night, a lecture about Rabbi Jonathan Sachs and his yard site, and that's not a true sentence, a statement about women are very, very prominent in Judaism, unlike any other holiday. I mean, any other religion. So it sounds like we're not, but we are. So that's a story for another time.
I don't mean to suggest that at all. I just
Oh.
mean that it's not mentioned. But
Right. So it's not, a
Well,
lot of
because
things.
It's usually when a baby is born, it's obvious that the baby came from the mother then and there.
Right.
But, to say who the father is, I guess you could think it could be anybody. So they
Right.
make a point of
Right,
saying.
exactly. That's very
good,
true.
good way of explaining.
Yes, okay.
Not
So-
among us all, but you never know.
Right. Okay. Okay, so in verse 29, we learned that a second letter has gone out. And it says the authority to ratify the second letter of Purim. And here is where I believe the scroll of the Megillat Esther goes out with the letter. And the dispatches were sent to all Jews, and it says to the 127 provinces of King Ahasuerus. They wanted to be very clear that no Jew was left out of this. Everybody received this message in every province with words of peace and truth to establish these days of Purim on the proper dates, just as Mordecai the Jew and Queen Esther had enjoined them. In other words, this sentence, this pasuk, gives a ratification of the celebration of the holiday, and it gives it extra authority because Queen Esther, it says Queen Esther, Queen of Persia Media, she is the queen. So it gives credence to the fact that Mordecai not only is Ahasuerus' second in command at this point, but it says the queen and Mordecai send this out together. So it's not just, the scribes are sending out a memo. It is a decree, and they want it to be understood that this is law. And this is the final letter that is sent out to reinforce this holiday. And it says Esther's ordinance validated these regulations of Purim, and it was recorded in the book. In other words, it was sealed and it was done. Okay? It tells us that this is what happened and it's done. Now, I want to continue because I want the recording to be available to all those who have not were able to hear this and who are not going to be at next week's SIEM. So let's quickly go to chapter 10, the final chapter. Dorothy, would you read that for us, please?
King Ahasuerus made the people on the mainland and the islands pay taxes. All his mighty and powerful acts and the full story of the greatness of Mordecai, whom the king had promoted, are written in the history book of the kings of Media and Persia. And now in big red letters,
Yes.
for Mordecai the Jew was second in command to King Ahasuerus. He was a great man among the Jews, and most of his people liked him. He tried to do good for his nation and to bring peace for all its children.
Okay. So the last chapter of Megillat Esther, 3 psukim. Don't forget, all of this story spans a time period of 9 years, from the 3rd year of Ahasuerus's rule to the 9th year of his rule.
Wait a minute.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. To the probably the 12th year of his rule. I'm sorry, that's a mistake. And in verse 1, pasuk 1, it tells us immediately at the end, and you would think that we would have finished the Megillat Esther in the last chapter. It was recorded, it was done, Zehu closed the book, but no, for some reason, Mordecai and Esther seemed to feel it was important to wrap it up under King Ahasuerus's name. We started with King Ahasuerus and his party, and then we end with King Ahasuerus imposing taxes. And by mentioning his tax, the text shows us that the king is still in charge, and that his bills still have to be paid, and that no matter that there's a holiday or not a holiday in the kingdom or throughout his empire, somebody's got to foot the bill. And guess who that's going to be? The people. The people have to foot the bill and pay the taxes that King Ahasuerus levies on everybody. And that it's important to understand that the splendor of the kingdom didn't just happen. It got funded, and King Ahasuerus could feel very generous and very splendid in giving his parties to everyone he wanted to share with. So here we find that taxation is levied upon the people, and there's only one other time that we hear that there was no taxation, and that's when Queen Esther was made queen by Ahasuerus. He stopped the taxes for a period of time when she became queen. It was like a gift to the people that they had a queen. Now, in verse 2 of this chapter, we learn that Not only does the king levy taxes, that his might and powerful acts and a full account of the greatness of Mordecai, whom the king had promoted, are recorded in the book of Chronicles of the kings of Media and Persia. In other words, this story is put in the annals of the history of the empire of Persia and Media. And so consequently, because of that, maybe they felt it was important to add a little something here about the king, so that it would have almost like a Persian flavor to it at the end and wouldn't be looked at as just a Jewish story. And it implies that all of King Ahasuerus's mighty and powerful acts are recorded in the annals and chronicles of the kings of Media and Persia. And this means that the story of Purim becomes a Persian story. And the mention of the royal chronicle that's placed at the end of the story implies a little bit of criticism of the Jews of Shushan or Persia. It means to say, what are you doing there? Why are you still there? So even in the last sentence of Megillat Esther, the concealed message is King Ahasuerus is still the king of Persia, and the Jews who are there who have been saved should not have been there in the first place. They should have gone home to Eretz Yisrael. This is a very important message that this story gives to us. And even today, people don't understand that. So even though the Jews played an important role in the plot of the story of the Persians and the Jews, they remain in exile in a land that is not their own.
Amen.
Okay, now the Talmud, 500 years later, after the Purim story, talks about how the rabbis of that period ordained that the 15th of Adar should be celebrated in walled cities, since Shushan was a walled city, and presumably they decided to include all walled cities because they realized that Shushan would not always be a place where Jews would have a Jewish community. So since most of the walled cities in Israel had been destroyed now, by the Babylonians, by all the fighting and what had been going on while the story of Esther is happening, since most of the cities that had walls in Jerusalem, in Israel, had been destroyed at the time of the writing of the Megillah, the rabbis of the Talmud ordained that the 15th of Adar should be celebrated in all cities which had walls around them like Shushan. However, this created a problem. What's the problem? And the problem is that Israel lay in ruins, and Jerusalem was not at the time of the Megillah a walled city. Remember, the walls had been breached and had been destroyed by the Babylonians. So its Jerusalem's status would have therefore been inferior to the other walled cities throughout the world. And Jerusalem would have to celebrate Purim on the 14th of Adar, just like every other city that was unwalled. So in order to accord honor to Jerusalem and to Israel, and to attach the remembrance of Israel to the Purim story, the rabbis decided that the cities that were walled from the days of Yehoshua ben Nun, remember Yehoshua?
Yep.
He was the one in charge coming into Eretz Yisrael after Moshe, that all cities that were walled at the time in the days of Yehoshua ben Nun should celebrate Purim on the 15th of Adar. Okay, so now you know where this comes from. It comes from the Talmudic rabbis, and therefore it means it includes Yerushalayim in the celebration. Shushan itself, which was unwalled at the time of Yehoshua, was granted special status because the miracle happened there. So now you know the rest of the story, that the rabbis of the Talmud grant all walled cities at the time of Yehoshua ben Nun the status like Shushan to celebrate Purim on the 15th.
Are there other cities today that are considered walled that we know of here?
No, not really, because they're in dispute whether they were walled cities back then, like Ashdod,
right.
Svat, Ashdod, Tveria. All the cities had walls around them, but we don't know at what point they were walled. And so consequently, it's hard to say. So most people basically celebrate it on the 14th.
If I may say something, I have several Jewish friends from Iran.
Yes.
Which is, of course, Persia. And they told me that ever since those days, apparently Mordechai and Esther are buried side by side. And like you said before, that became a Persian holiday as well.
Right.
So they go and they daven in front of their kever.
Right.
And I'm not talking about Jews. I'm talking about Iranians who are not Jews.
Right. No, I understand. I understand.
Yeah.
Yes, it is. It's in the it is in the DNA of the Persian Empire. So yes, she was their queen.
Right.
Can I ask why we celebrate Purim on when it's a leap year on Adar Sheni?
Because we do it as close to Nisan as possible.
Nisan.
Yes, because that's also a holiday, Pesach, of redemption and salvation.
Thank you.
Now,
I've never had a satisfactory explanation.
yeah.
Rhonda, can I say something, Rhonda?
Yes, of course.
First of all, talking about the walls, there's a slight possibility, I don't think it can be proven, but I did hear, and I tend to believe it, that there is an archaeological site around Modi'in that could possibly have been the original place of the Maccabees, home of the Maccabees. And it's thought that it had a wall. Well, they know it had a wall because it's on the Madaba map. But it's thought that it dated back to First Temple times. So it's possible that Modi'in of the time also had a wall. That's one thing. The other thing I want to say is that I used to work for many years with a girl from Georgia, not Georgia in the States, Georgia Gruzini. And she always used to say when it got to Purim, she always used to say that, well, she left there, I think, when she was newly married, so she was still quite young. So during her childhood, the Jews in her area always baked lots and lots and lots of pastries, and they gave them away to their neighbors and friends and relatives, and it was a huge big thing. And she said they used to make so many that was the last time they baked before Pesach. They didn't bake again until Pesach. And it was really a huge big celebration. And it was then that I realized that, you know, places like Georgia and the surrounding areas, also they kept up these very strong, the traditions very strongly. Whereas we in England growing up, all we had were the Hamantaschen and the dreidels, you know, and it was very watered down. But in those areas, it was kept very strongly.
Well, the Mordecai says specifically that when you give a gift, it should be of delicacies and at least two, manot is plural, to give to your friend, and to the poor, there should be tzedakah that is given so that every Jew, even the poor, can have a feast on Purim. So the tzedakah that you give to the poor is so that everybody, no matter what their financial status or station in life, can all celebrate this holiday of Purim with festivity and with feasting.
So if it's delicacies, I guess Oreos don't count.
It depends what.
No.
It all depends what your feasting includes. So clearly, you know, every one of us has our own choice of
Delicacies.
what makes us have delicacies.